Hello, everyone. We are live on YouTube and LinkedIn again, bringing you another exciting episode of the Top Innovator Series. This is where we dive into proven leadership ideas, game-changing strategies, and of course, the brilliant minds behind all of this. My name is Joseph Martins, and I'm super excited to introduce our guest for today. With us today is Tom Scott. Tom is the founder of CyberSherpas, a virtual cybersecurity company. He's also the inaugural director of the South Carolina Cyber Consortium. He's a member of the FBI's InfraGuard program, and he also serves as an advisory board member. Tom, it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us this morning.
Thank you, Joseph. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Great, let's dive right in. Super accomplished career, many highlights in your career, Tom. When you reflect on it, I'd be curious to know, where do you see the secret ingredients to your success? What brought you to where you are today?
I would say the secret ingredients, if there is any, is working for good bosses. Working for individuals that
Okay.
not only have the workplace in mind, but have you in mind as well. I worked for a gentleman one time, and he said, I am failing you if I, as your supervisor, am not preparing you for your next job. I think I was, I don't know, 25, 28. And when he said that, Joseph, it absolutely blew my mind.
It's
Because for
so,
me, work was a place where you just went to work.
mhm.
And that's how you got paid. That's how you paid your bills. It wasn't a career to me at that
Mm,
point.
mhm.
And when he did that, it indicated to me a level of, as the boss, you don't always have to be the bad guy. As the boss, you can actually be a good guy. And if you're doing like he did, where you're working to help your employees get their next position, then that just stuck with me. It truly did.
That's an impressive attitude, right? It really takes a long-term perspective for the relationship that you're building there, and also you put the focus on the other person. That that is awesome. Tell me more about how that helped you. What were some moments where you really got the sense it is about you? Your boss made it about you.
Well, I'm going to go back and give additional examples of
Hmm.
leadership that I received like
Hmm.
that. Again, working for a gentleman named Scott Stewart in Florida, he just provided me with the opportunities to be successful.
Hmm.
And so I try and do the same in a
Hmm.
leadership position. I adopt those same philosophies that were shared with me. How do I make you a better person? It's Wayne Gretzky says, skate to where the puck is going to be.
Mm.
I think there's a famous philosopher that talks about, and sorry, I didn't do my research, that talks about if I treat you as who you are today, you will remain that person forever. If I treat you as who you could be, that is the potential person you could become. It may be Goethe, Goethe, I know it's a philosopher, and I thought that's a pretty darn good perspective.
That's powerful. That is really powerful, right? To speak to the person, seeing them as their potential instead of the flaws that are typically so easy to focus on, right?
Right.
And instead of that, taking away from that. Yeah. Tell me some of the lessons that you've learned on your journey. What were some aha moments as you expanded your leadership? What were some things that maybe have been surprising to you?
So what I just turned 60, and I'm amazed at how many things I've learned in the last 10 years that seem to be epiphanic or incredibly eye-opening. Things that maybe I just wasn't paying attention to in my 20s and 30s. Or maybe it's just a combination of life experiences and work experience that provide me those new perspectives. Um, but I would say one of the biggest ones uh, was forced into me by a former supervisor. Again, I'll go back
Hmm.
to learning from leadership, where I went to his office one day and I said, I need a new firewall. And he said, how big is the fine and who goes to jail if I don't give you one? And Joseph, I walked out of his office
Interesting.
scratching my
Okay.
head going, "Ooh, how big is the fine? What does that even mean?" And I got back to my desk, and between leaving his office and getting back to my desk, I figured it out. It was his risk management strategy that me, amongst one of his direct reports, I'm one of many people coming asking for limited resources. And so he's got to figure out what does he give, what does he not
Yeah.
give. And as idiotic and pithy as it may be of who goes to jail and how big is the fine, yeah, I thought it was a very valid risk management strategy.
Hmm.
So I went back into the next day because then I said, hey, I said, I thought you were blowing me off. I thought you were just coming up with a way to give me one of those illogical circle conundrums that I could never figure out. I said, but I understand now as a risk management professional what you were doing there. And he said, let me help you. He says, it's all about capabilities. And I thought, okay, I know what the word capability means,
Hmm.
but I didn't. I didn't know what it meant. And he said, look, a capability is something that you have to be able to deliver from your team on behalf of the organization. I thought, okay,
Okay.
I understand that. Pretty simple,
Hmm.
easy. And he said, so it's not about the firewall. The firewall is a tool. The capability that you need to be able to deliver on behalf of the organization is the ability to monitor the ingress and the egress of traffic on the network.
Hmm.
And if you had come to me and said, I need the capability of making sure we're monitoring the traffic on our network, I'd have put you to the top of my priority list. And so I think one of if there was anything I took away
Hmm.
from it, some of it was learning the style and the expectations of leadership. That same boss was a big Braves fan for the Atlanta Braves baseball team, Joseph.
Okay.
And so I learned to figure out, I would ask Alexa at 11 o'clock at night, did the Braves win? Because I knew if the Braves won the next morning, I had a better chance of asking for something and
Yep.
being able to get it.
Yep.
But that was part of learning that strategy. And as an old boss, you could say the pathology of that individual supervisor.
This is a great example. It's a great example for really putting yourself into the shoes of the other person, right? Really being completely in the perspective of that other person. It's a little thing to know the sports team, to know what this person is interested in, and then learning something about that. Right? But that
Well,
really. Mm.
one of my strategies
Oh.
is connection.
Mm-hmm.
I walk into someone's office and I immediately scan the wall and I scan the
Mm-hmm.
bookcase.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a degree from a common university or even an adversary on the football field? Is there a trophy? Is there a picture of them with their family?
Yep. Yep.
I met someone recently. They had a picture of them and their family, and they had three daughters. And I joked with them, and I said, "What did you do in your past life that you deserved three daughters?" And he said, "You're funny." And I said, "Well, one day I was driving down the road, and my daughter looked up and saw the back of a van, and it had the stick figure family, and there
Okay.
was the husband, the wife, and the three
Mm-hmm.
daughters." And she looked up and she says, "Oh, Dad, that poor man." And I thought, I've raised my daughter well because she had a sense of humor
Right.
to be
Right.
able to look at
Yeah.
something and be able to
Yeah.
just again apply a level of levity and jocularity to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Let me ask you a different question of how you got to where you are. A lot of us depend on mentors, what other people tell us, what we learn from other people. Talk to me about some of the advice that you got from mentors or trusted advisors or people who were important to you. What were some pieces of advice they shared with you that really resonated, that helped you, that opened something up that wasn't there before, Tom?
Got it. So I will look to a different supervisor this time, who
Okay.
was famous for some of his quotes. One of those was, "If you lie with dogs, you're sure to have fleas."
Hmm.
Another one that he dropped was, "Who are the five people that you hang out with the most?
Hmm.
Because those will be the people that influence you."
Hmm.
And it's funny when he said that, it reminded me of a quote from my grandmother. She used to tell my mother and all her siblings, tell me who you're with and I'll tell you who you are.
Yeah.
And so if I go back on a professional note,
Yeah.
his comment was, who do you surround yourself with professionally to help you grow and become a better professional and better person?
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things where if you don't do something intentionally,
It doesn't happen.
then perhaps you're not surrounding yourself with the best five people.
Mm-hmm.
I joke and I say every relationship, somebody's taking something and somebody's giving something. And you want as many relationships where there's somebody giving something to you as possible, and as few where you're having to take from others.
Yeah.
It kind of goes back to the whole fishes and loaves
Yeah.
philosophy of the better and the more you share, then the better collectively we all are.
Yeah. Yeah. The advice to surround yourself with the right five people and be intentional about this is awesome, right? Because many of us find ourselves randomly in the communities, in the groups that we are, and there's much more we can do, and
Right.
to really shape how we become. Goes very well with what you said before about speaking to the other person as their potential and not as who they are at the moment.
Right. The other
Let's move.
famous quote he had was, you can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig.
Yeah.
And so again, there are many pithy phrases that my bosses have left me with that I then use as I'm teaching the next generation or as part of classes to inject a little bit of levity and humor in having to teach a cybersecurity class.
Yep. Yep. Let me move away from your past and take a look at where you are at the moment. And this is not about positions, companies, or titles or anything like this. It's about your leadership journey. So I would love to know, what are you working on at the moment? What is an area where you think I can spend more attention on this? This is a growth opportunity for me. I can develop here. There is something that's still possible.
Well, I have about five of those. I have to be careful and
Awesome.
make sure that
Wow.
I don't
Okay.
get too spread out myself. Couple things. So I just started. You said it's not about roles, but I
Right.
just started working with a university in Aiken, South Carolina, that's tied in with the National Laboratory and U.S. Army Cyber Command, helping them
Mm-hmm.
with workforce development. And so, an opportunity to work at a university in academic setting, an opportunity to work with students, providing them with experiential learning opportunities, are things that all help Tom's heart feel bigger.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Um, Equally, um, part of what I have been involved in lately has been events.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned the word connection earlier. And in one position I held, my title was executive director.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my friends says we should call you the executive connector because in events I try and look for someone, and Floyd over here has this software that's amazing cybersecurity software, and John over here has this hardware,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going, you guys should be talking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so um, we've started an events company. It's called Aegis X, and we're looking at bringing together cybersecurity,
Okay.
AI, and data science to be able to collectively have those conversations, because we know that the future isn't going to be any one of those silos. They're going to be interwoven. So how can we get ahead of the game and bring people together and connect them to be able to make sure that we're we're collectively working together. The bad guys work together. If the
Right.
good guys don't, then we just give them an uneven playing field.
Yeah.
And then the last is I'm doing some training videos,
Mm-hmm.
little short videos of a not too dissimilar from this conversational
Awesome.
type
Mm-hmm.
versus, a lecture. And those are on AI. And so that personally, and this may lead to your next question, sir, um, doing that um, because I know it's forcing me to learn. If I've got
Perfect.
to teach something, I've got to be, I mean, I don't have to be an expert, but I better be learned. And so it's forcing me to learn about some of the newer technologies and things that we see out there that are most certainly on the horizon, that will be here tomorrow or that are already here and we don't know about it.
Yep. And we need to get
People
ready
talk
for it.
about AI. Well, we've
Mm.
been doing AI since the 1950s with Alan Turing. And back in 1980, IBM's Watson won Jeopardy. And so AI didn't happen yesterday.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Now, you indicated the next question. I'm going to go into the future now, Tom, now that we talked about today, right? And AI is probably leading there. But I'm not going to ask you about AI or about any technologies. I would like to know from you where you see your future. Again, not roles, not positions, not projects, but in terms of your leadership development. So let's say we have this conversation again in 2 or 3 years' time. What are you likely going to tell me about your learning over the last couple of years? What's that learning area where Tom is, like you said, I loved what you said before, has a bigger heart, is growing his heart.
Right.
But what is the next version of Tom? What's the next version like?
So the next version of Tom.
Uh-huh.
So I describe myself as having dual personalities. I give my colleague Pete Sieber in North Carolina credit for this
Okay.
because I was talking with Pete about all the many things that I do. And he says, it sounds like you have two areas of focus. You have your for-profit focus and you have your for-passion focus. And I love the fact that they were alliterative, that they both started with the word P, profit and passion.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat back and I said, okay, let me think about what he just said. And yes, so on the CyberSherpas front, in terms of the consulting, that is what pays the mortgage and pays the bills.
Mm-hmm.
On the Cyber South Carolina or the other, what I call the nonprofit or the passion side, that's what feeds the heart, like I said.
Yeah.
Ideally, in 2 years, I would love for the for-profit to be more sustainable and more profitable because it's built into the word profit,
Right. Right.
which then gives me more opportunities to focus on the for passion part of my personality and the things I like doing. Had a great couple weekends this past month judging
Mm-hmm.
robotics for the first robotics group, meeting some of the most incredible leaders that we're going to have over the next 5 or 10 years of some of these brilliant high school students and having more opportunities to do things like that to contribute back to the greater community are where I would like to see myself
Awesome.
in that 2
Mm-hmm.
or 3 year period.
Awesome. This little comment about expanding the heart or making the heart go bigger really has a lot of application, right? And it can show up in so many different ways.
Well, we got to come
Let
up with
me,
that work-life balance.
yep.
And that's kind of how I describe that is here's
Mm-hmm.
my work for the for-profit,
Yep.
and then my life is trying to be helpful in my community and even
Mm-hmm.
outside of my community.
Yep. Yep. Let me ask you one last question, Tom, and then we'll wrap it up. What is something that you notice that many tech executives don't see? Where are they missing something? Where are they not realizing something and it's a missed opportunity for them?
So let me go back to our previous
Mm-hmm.
conversation and talk about decision making.
Okay.
And maybe and as our wrap up, we talked previously about decision making and how
Mm-hmm.
many people have people don't realize that there's decision fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
And after a certain number of decisions, you start making suboptimal decisions. And so I think what people don't understand is that you've got to you have to strategically make decisions.
Yeah.
I read a Jeff Bezos article, and he makes his decisions at 10 and 11 o'clock in the morning. He doesn't make tough decisions at
Yeah.
3 o'clock in the afternoon when his brain is tired. So a level of self-awareness is always helpful. G.I. Joe says knowing is half the battle. Um, I think in the movie Dune, it was all about a level of awareness of yourself and your capabilities. And so I think anything that you can drive to be more self-aware will help you be a better person,
Yeah.
a better father, a better husband, better whatever, and a better leader as well.
Can I ask you to dig a little bit deeper into the decision making? Because when we spoke before, I really enjoyed your story about the commute and the number of decisions we have. Do you mind telling that
No,
to
not at all.
the
Real
broader
quickly,
audience? Because
I mentioned earlier that I love it when my adult children teach me things. So I'm talking with my son one day, and we're talking about I had a 90-mile commute to work every day. It was a great opportunity, but it came with some pluses and minuses. And he said, Dad, most people have about 10 good decisions in them a day. And he goes, and I bet you spend all of those just getting to work in the morning. And when he said that, epiphanic, wow, that means that I'm getting to work and I'm already tired in my brain from having to make all those decisions of weaving in and out of bad traffic and maybe even being the bad traffic myself. And so at work, for those next 6-8 hours, I'm making suboptimal decisions. Maybe not bad decisions, but maybe not the most fresh brain decisions. And then, Joseph, the scary thing was that when I had to drive home that 90 miles, I was out of good decisions. And as a risk management person, I had to take a look at that and say, that's not a good scenario. I made a change in the job that eliminated that 90-mile commute to work every day, simply because the last thing I needed to do was to make a bad decision on a highway driving 80 miles an hour,
of course,
and then cause either damage, negative impact, or loss of life, not only to myself, but maybe even to someone else.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that story again. I'm this concept of having a limited number of good decisions in us per day. I think that's intriguing, and using those wisely, using them, whatever we find is the right application for them. But that's neat. I've never thought of decisions that way, as a limited resource in a day.
Well, I told you earlier, I referee. And everyone's expecting good decisions the entirety of that match. And sometimes I go back and sometimes I'll make a decision and I won't sleep for 2 days because of the decision I made. Where I go back and I rethink it and I said, how could I have done that differently? How could I have de-escalated that situation so it didn't end up where it was? And I have another colleague, he videotapes all of his games. And he goes back and he does a level of self-assessment and said, in this situation, I think I made the right decision. Now I have the benefit of videotaping and watching it in slow motion and watching it 6 times to be able to better determine whether that was a right or wrong decision. And so hopefully the next time I have to make a similar decision, I've thought this process through before I have to make and in refereeing, we call them, or they called it, multiple decision situations. I have to be looking here, I have to be looking here, I have to be looking here, I have to be looking behind me, and making a decision on each of those different communities and players in a grand decision.
So there really is a meta decision first, almost, right? The choice of which decision or which situation am I focusing on, and then consequently which decision will I be making. Fascinating.
I had a situation the other day. I had 2 young boys. They bumped into each other. I went to go give them my stern voice, and I have a coach yelling at me. And when I looked to see what he was yelling about, the other coach had come on the field and was 4 feet away from me. And I had to turn to the coach and say, you have to go off the field. You have to go off the field. And then I had to turn to the other coach and say, stop yelling at me because I'm taking care of the situation. Guess what? I ended up having to terminate that game because the coaches were getting into a fist fight. I never got to come back to my original premise of addressing the 2 young boys who had gotten into a tussle. So yes, I had to be making multiple decisions, and what was my primary decision got taken away from me. And without any control of mine, I had to immediately turn and address the adults who wanted to be children.
I'm glad we got to the topic of decision making, and I really like the story you shared. I would like to take it one step further on the decisions. Because I'm just fascinated by it now, and I think others will be as well. What would be your advice in terms of decision making in the context of leadership then? The thing that springs to mind, right? We can't videotape us, or maybe we can on a meeting like this, right? So we could revisit decisions that are made in a Teams meeting or in a Zoom meeting or so. But would you advocate for journaling decisions that we make as leaders, or do you think that's too cumbersome? What's your thinking on that? So how do we do that learning from the decisions?
Yeah, Joseph, my undergraduate degree was in journalism. I may be in cybersecurity now. So when you talk about journaling and writing, that fits exactly in with my inner training and personality. So yes, I think journaling is not a bad thing, but not everybody likes written paper.
Right.
So there may be other ways of journaling as well. For me, and again, I go back to an article I read on Jeff Bezos talking about decision making. For those decisions that you can walk back from, don't spend a lot of time. So if a decision cannot be walked back from, spend a lot of time and make sure you're making a good decision. If that requires journaling, or that requires modeling or peer discussions, whatever, then do so. If a decision can be walked back from, make a decision.
Just make it.
And then if you need to, walk back from it.
Yeah.
But spend time on the tough decisions.
Yeah.
And don't waste energy and effort on the decisions that can be walked back from.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Tom, that's a great note to finish on, and I'm really, really glad we talked about the decision making. I love the stories that you put in there. Thank you so much. And something else that will stick with, so many things will stick with me from the conversation. Growing the heart bigger. I love that phrasing that you've used. And I've got to go back how exactly you said it, but I really enjoyed that as the future to grow into. And something else.
Go back to the cartoon, The Grinch.
Okay.
And we remember in the cartoon, The Grinch, he had the small heart. And once he did something that was powerful, his heart grew big. And that's just kind of how I look as I'll call it an underlying philosophy is how do I find ways to be less grinchy and have a bigger heart.
Awesome. Tom, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you with us today. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Thank you. For everyone else who's out there, it's been a pleasure that you were here. Remember to like, subscribe, and join us again for the next podcast. And until then, make sure to keep your brain cells active.